Personalism in multicultural counseling, all people must adjust to environmental and geological demands. Culture must mold itself such that individuals can best thrive and survive in a given environment. Personalism implies that the counselor will make the best progress if he or she sees the client primarily as a person who has learned a set of survival skills rather than yeah, a diseased patient. Fierce environmental conditions, such as living in a desert or poverty stricken neighborhood, cause individuals to cooperate with each other more and stick together as a group. So think about like people like cults and Mormons, like they live in deserted areas or like areas that's very secluded, even like Native Americans, or if you think about poverty stricken neighborhoods, like they're going to stick together and lean on each other. These persons will want to check out the counselor's authenticity as a person, and a counselor who keeps her professional distance runs the risk of being seen as superficial. This could cause problems for the counselor since, one, in the US, professionalism is stressed more than personalism, in the sense that a good counselor is not supposed to get very close to clients. And two, the counselor has not necessarily grown up in a culture that stresses such a high level of interpersonal cooperation. So those could cause problems for the counselor if they just haven't experienced, don't know, didn't grow up in those types of areas, poverty stricken or desert, to understand the reason why they stick together as a group, and then just national culture in the US, professionalism is stressed. So contracting, contracting um, is a transactional analysis or TA, reality therapy, and behavioral intervention, all stress contracting. So, contracting is popular in transactional analysis, reality therapy, and behavioral intentions. All three of those stress contracting. Contracting has merits in cross cultural situations because it keeps the counselor from shoving a dose of his or her own cultural values down the client's throat. The client has input before signing or agreeing with the contract. TA, Transactional Analysis, Eric Bernay, has been praised for, and this is the three ego states: the child, the parent, the child, the adult, the parent. So TA has been praised for illuminating cultural and ethnic injunctions. However, its lingo is often complex for a client with a different background. So, one other theory that we talked about being popular is Gestalt therapy in multicultural counseling, and then now we're talking about TA, and Gestalt is Fitzgerald's, while TA is Eric Bernay. So, TA, transactional analysis, has been praised for illuminating cultural and ethnic injunctions. However, its lingo is often complex for a client with a different background. Gestalt therapy, Fitzgerald's, is a superb modality for cultures that need to liberate their feelings. It is helpful when working with a population which emphasizes nonverbal communication. The dangers in Gestalt comes from pushing techniques. And pushing techniques is trying to insist upon them before clients are ready for them. So the dangers in Gestalt comes from pushing techniques that emphasize the expression of feelings on a cultural or ethnic group, which views the expression of feelings as a sign of weakness. So the in Gestalt, where you are, creating this non-judgmental environment. You're also being a little controversial. You're pushing the client to express themselves, but you have to be careful, um, because if you push them before they're ready, or if they come from a culture where expressing one's feelings is a sign of weakness, you may push them away from therapy instead of towards their expressions. So, just thought therapy is similar to person-centered therapy. Carl Rogers and so forth. Just thought comes with that confrontation. That's the C word, confrontation piece, pushing piece. Behaviorism involves assertiveness. So we said that contracting is stressed in transactional analysis, reality therapy, and behavioral interventions. Behaviorism involves assertiveness. Rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT, and that's Albert Ellis, can be helpful when counseling clients from another culture because it does not stress mental illness. The perception of the REBT practitioner as a teacher makes the process of helping more palatable to some populations. So remember, in REBT, what we want to do is move away from the emotional response or the destructive emotional response and move more towards a logical response and way of handling the situation. So you want to move from irrational emotional response to a rational emotional and logical response. So that's REBT. Albert Ellis can be helpful when counseling clients from another culture because it does not stress mental illness. The perception of the REBT practitioner as a teacher makes the process of helping more palatable to some populations. Every brand of therapy has its merits and disadvantages. It is best if a multicultural counselor remains flexible. Experts in multicultural counseling feel that the counselor's training should be broad and interdisciplinary. So we have race versus ethnicity. Race is not the same as ethnicity. You can generally see racial differences, that's biological, face structure, color of skin, since they are the result of genetics, versus ethnicity, um, is more so like commonalities in religion, um, language, linguistic, or cultural attributes. So, ethnicity is that which pertains to a large group of individuals who are categorized by national, religious, linguistic, or cultural attributes. Pluralism, an individual exists in more than one category. Pluralism. Separatism, when a group of people totally withdraw from the political majority. And remember, counterculture was when a group of persons vehemently oppose the values of their culture or the dominant culture. And then we have pluralism. An individual exists in more than one category. Cultural pluralism, when persons of a cultural heritage retain their traditions and differences, yet cooperate in regards to social, political, and economic matters. So that's kind of similar to assimilation. I mean, a, a culturation, not a sorry. So pluralism is when persons of a cultural heritage retain their traditions and differences, yet cooperate in regards to social, political, and economic matters. And that's similar to acculturation, where ethnic and racial minorities integrate or adopt cultural beliefs and customs from the majority or dominant culture. That's acculturation is taking in some of the culture. And culture pluralism is kind of the same thing. Is you retain your tradition and differences, yet you cooperate in regards to social, political, and economic matters. Separatism is when a group of people totally withdraw from the political majority. So that would be more so like counter culture and assimilation. Then we have Floyd Henry Alport. He created the concept of social facilitation when a given task when given a task to memorizing a list of numbers will people will perform better if he or she is a part of a group. The presence of other people improves an individual's performance, i.e., athletes and students, even when there is no verbal interaction. So Floyd Henry Alport created the concept of social facilitation. That is when given a task to memorize a list of numbers, the participant will perform better if he or she is a part of a group. The presence of other people improves an individual's performance. Think athletes and students, even when there is no verbal interaction. So it doesn't require them talking and helping each other out verbally, but it's simply just the presence. Is that social facilitation. The sleeper effect. After a period of time, one forgets the communicator but remembers the message. When you are attempting to change someone's opinion, the change may not occur immediately after the verbal exchange. A delay may occur before the client accepts the message. So the sleeper effect, like, oh, let me sleep on that. You told me something, let me sleep on it. I'll go to sleep, and then it's like, oh, okay, now it's clicking. um, I can accept the message now. And then often people forget who the communicator is, who told them, but they'll remember the overall message. Like, oh, I once heard or someone told me. We have William McDowell. He's known for the introduction to social psychology, which expounded on his hormic psychology position that individuals as well as groups' behavior is the result of inherited tendencies to seek goals. So William McDowell, let's see, is he on this one? So what we learned earlier is William McDougall, father of Hormic psychology, which derived from a Darwinian viewpoint, which stated that individuals in or out of groups are driven by innate inherited tendencies. His Hormic psychology lost ground after the behaviorist movement picked up steam. He believed in eugenics, the notion that genetics would improve the gene pool in the human condition. That would be done through selective breeding of those with high intelligence. So, William McDougall is popular for his introduction to social psychology, which expounded on his hormic psychology position that individuals as well as group behavior is the result of inherited tendencies to seek goals. We have Edward Ellsworth Ross. He's known as for social psychology. Edward Ellsworth Ross, social psychology. We have Jacob Moreno. He pioneered psychodrama and coined the term group therapy. Okay, so Jacob Moreno pioneered psychodrama and coined the term group therapy. Irvin Yalom is an extension, extensionalist, existentialist, well known for work in group therapy, existential therapy, and death and dying. Irvin Yalom, existentialist, well known for work in group therapy, existential therapy, and death and dying. John Holland, he is important. He stressed that a person's occupational environment should be congruent with his or her personality type. That's John Holland. Think the hexagon. That's Riasek. He created the Holland codes, including realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. Riasek. And we learned about him in career counseling or vocational counseling. John Holland. He stressed that a person's occupational environment should be congruent with his or her personality type. We have Anne Rowe. She stated that jobs can compensate for unmet childhood needs. She had a fields and levels approach to group career counseling. The 8 fields were service, business contract, organization, technology, outdoor, science, general culture, and arts and entertainment. In 6 levels, which was professional and managerial, levels 1 and 2, semi professional and small business, level 3, skilled level 4, semi skilled level 5, and unskilled level 6. And that's Anne Rowe. She felt as though jobs can compensate for unmet childhood needs. She had a fields and levels approach to group career counseling. We have T.X. Barber espoused a cognitive theory of hypnotism. Andrew Salter, he's a pioneer in the behavior therapy, creating a paradigm dubbed conditioned reflex therapy and a behavioristic therapy of hypnosis and auto hypnosis. That's Andrew Salter. Salter. Stanley Milgram, he's a noted psychologist. He's associated with obedience and authority. He discovered that people who were told to give others powerful electrical shocks did so on command. Even when the subject heard the person receiving the shock screaming, they often continued to raise the level of voltage when told to do so. It explains obedience to authority in social situations such as the Salem witch hunts or Nazi war crimes. It predicted that 1% would administer the highest level of shock, and he predicted that only one would administer the highest level of shock, In reality, 65% dished out fatal shock punishment. If the authority figure was in the room, the tendency to obey was higher than if he or she was not physically present. And that was Stanley Milgram in his experiment with electric shock, which was based on obedience and authority. Related is Bigman. Related is the Leonard Bigman study. Individuals were told to give a dime or a paper bag to a stranger, did so twice as often when the person giving the orders was dressed as a guard rather than a peer. And that was the Leonard Bigman study. But really important is the Stanley Milgram, obedience and authority, who dished out powerful electric shocks. So affiliate versus affiliate no well affiliate slash affiliation refers to the need one has to associate with others. To affiliate. So affiliate slash affiliation refers to the need one has to associate with others. Is the highest among firstborns and only children and decreases for later born children. So the need one has to associate with others is highest among firstborns and only children and decreases for later born children. It was researched by Stanley Schachter, Schachtr. When told that they would be receiving a shock, one third of participants receiving a tingle selected to wait while others, oh no, when told that they would be receiving a shock, one third of participants receiving a tingle selected to wait with others, while 62% of the high anxiety group decided to do so. So only when it was only a tingle, 33% selected to wait with others, while when it was a high anxiety group, 62% decided to wait with others. So it just shows how people desire to be around others, especially in high anxiety groups or situations. In most of the cases, people think like, oh, if, it's high anxiety, you want to be by yourself. But when you really truly think about high anxiety, think about like a bank robbery or something like that, where, you wouldn't want to be alone. You wouldn't want to be the only victim. So follow-up research indicates that a person with high anxiety will not choose to be with others unless the other individuals are in a similar situation. So, like a bank robbery, like you are all in the same type of situation. So, that's when you would want to be around others. But individuals are more comfortable sharing real fear than anxiety, which could result in embarrassment or shame. So, like, if it's like a fear, if I have high anxiety of getting on an elevator, then I may want to do that alone because I don't want to be embarrassed. Versus if I'm in a bank robbery, I want other people to be there because that is a real fear versus just in what's perceived as an anxiety. So this research is somewhat similar to Festinger's theory of social comparison, which, remember, his theory of social comparison postulated that people have a need to compare themselves with others to assess their own abilities and options. The theory further asserts that we will compare ourselves to others who are basically similar to us. So Just to go back on things that we know about Festinger, um, Festinger discovered that friendships and attraction were highest for apartment dwellers living next door to each other. Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory stated that people are motivated to reduce tension and discomfort. They wanted to put an end to dissonance, which is discord or inconsistencies. In cognitive dissonance theory, someone can have an approach conflict, approach avoidance conflict, or an avoidance conflict. Approach is the easiest conflict and results in the least amount of frustration. Approach avoidance is the toughest type of conflict due to the highest level of frustration. And then avoidance is essentially two negative or undesirable options, and the person will want to flee, daydream, or regress instead of confronting the choices. So then Leon Festinger, he also had this theory of social comparison, which postulates that people have a need to compare themselves with others to assess their own abilities and options. The theory further asserts that we will compare ourselves to others who are basically similar to us. So going back to affiliate or affiliation, remember that this refers to the needs one has to associate with others, is highest amongst firstborn and only children. It was researched by Stanley Shockter, um, and this was another tingle versus shock, where if you wanted 33% receiving a tingle, which is kind of like not that big of a deal, wanted to wait with others, while 62% of the high anxiety group decided to do so. If follow-up research indicates that a person with high anxiety will not choose to be with others unless the other individuals are in a similar situation. Also, affiliation. Think about misery loves miserable company. People affiliate in an attempt to lower fear. Researchers in the field of counseling are somewhat critical of most psychosocial experiments since the experimental situations are often artificial and the studies lack external validity, which is the ability to help understand behavior outside the experimental setting. We have Charles Osgood and Percy Tenenbaum. They are the pioneers of congruity theory, which says a client will accept suggestions more readily if the client likes the counselor. And a depth counselor usually supports the salad bowl theory, where people are mixed together, but like lettuce and tomatoes in a salad, they retain their unique cultural identity. The melting pot is not favorable since different cultures assimilate or melt into, which it says, the melting pot says that different cultures assimilate or melt into the dominant culture, but that's not true. It's more so acculturation where people retain their own cultural identity, and that would be cultural pluralism and acculturation, retaining one's identity while still having some pieces of the dominant culture. Just going back a little bit, Charles Osgood and Percy Tannenbaum, they are the pioneers of congruency theory. A client will accept suggestions more readily if the client likes the counselor. And then just moving forward on, and a depth counselor usually supports the salad bowl theory. people are mixed together, but like lettuce and tomatoes in a salad, they retain their unique cultural identity. So then we have Musafir Sharif et al. Musafir Sharif et al. Classical experiment in social psychology at a boys' summer camp near Roberts Cave, Oklahoma, is sometimes called the Roberts Cave experiment. And this is a classical experiment in social psychology that was performed at a boys' summer camp near Roberts Cave, Oklahoma. The findings was that a cooperative or so-called superordinate goal attained only by working in a joint manner can bring two hostile groups together, thus reducing competition and enhancing cooperation. So the findings was that a cooperative or so-called subordinate goal attained only by work with a goal can only be attained by working in a joint manner, and it can bring two hostile groups together, thus reducing competition and enhancing cooperation. So like when the boys were very competitive, they didn't like each other in the groups. What they did was create a superordinate goal so that way they could work in a joint manner, and it brought them together. And that was Musafir Sharif et al. Roberts Cave. Sex role stereotyping would imply that a counselor would only consider traditional feminine careers for his female client, and a male counselor would rate a female client's emotional status differently than he would a male's client. Sex role stereotyping makes males and females counselors can display prejudice toward women. So, sex role stereotyping would imply that a counselor would only consider traditional feminine careers for his female client, and a male counselor would rate a female client's emotional status differently than he would a male client's. Males and female counselors can display prejudice toward women. Prejudice means that we are negative or have a rigid, inflexible attitude toward a given group of people and can often act on our unfavorable thought. Prejudiced people often prejudge others without substantial evidence. Women and other minorities are sometimes said to be victim of a caste system. Caste system means there are fixed layers of superiority and inferiority which are born into in which you are born into and thus cannot escape. So a caste system, it says there are fixed layers of superiority and inferiority which you are born into and thus cannot escape. And this and thus women and other minorities are typically the victims of a caste system, which falls under being prejudiced. Codependency grew mainly out of the chemical dependency and addiction treatment movement. It refers to an individual who is emotionally involved with a chemically dependent person, even members of family, and or is addicted to a relationship with another person on drugs. Racism occurs when an assumption is made that some races are better than others. Hence, the race which feels superior can deny the other race rights and respect. Sexism, one sex assumes that the other is inherently inferior. And we have social behavior, the ASTH situation. Experiments performed by Solomon Asch and Mutafir Sharif would predict that the person would most likely sell out or agree with the other five. So, like if you had six people together, then They Solomon Ash and Mosafir Sharif predicted that one person would most likely sell out and agree with the other five, regardless of what they actually believe. And we know another term of selling out would be like assimilating to the culture. If you assimilate, you become so much like the culture, similar to the culture that you no longer have your own, you no longer honor your own culture. So you could be a sellout. But going back to social behavior, the Ash situation just were predicted that in a group, if one person had a different view, they would sell out their view and agree with the other five. And that's different than um, the risky phenomenon, because then a risky phenomenon just means that an individual's decision would be more conservative than a group's decision. In a group, your decision is going to be a little more risky um, versus conserved. But again, going back to the social experiment of social behavior with Solomon Ash and Musafir Sharif, approximately 35% of persons tested in a perceptual activity gave an answer which was clearly incorrect in order to conform. Social researchers consistently have discovered that people will conform to an obviously incorrect, unanimous decision one third of the time. As few as three other people can produce conformity in a social setting. Individuals who are authoritarian and thus are heavily influenced by authority figures, people who are external approval seekers, and persons who feel that outside external factors control them conform the most. So the people who conform the most are those heavily influenced by authority figures, people who are external approval seekers, and persons who feel that outside external factors control them. Defines social behavior. And that is all we have for social and cultural diversity.